Hello again, it's Mr. Pete, your interweb shop teacher. And this is tips number 853, which is part one of a two-part video. And this part is entitled Disassembling the Wide Range 70 Speed South Bend Lathe Gearbox. In a recent temporary video, a plea for help, which may not be on there very long, I requested help from you viewers out there, and I did find out that this was used on the 10K or the heavy 10-inch South Bend lathes. It has 70 settings, 70 speeds and feeds rather than just the usual 48. And the crazy thing is that I once owned a 10K, and I had one of these and I used it, but I wasn't really at that time fully aware that there were different versions of this. But I'll give you a link right now, or I'll put it in the description of that video and the time slot if you want to see that particular machine that I owned. And if you purchased the 50 chapter South Bend lathe video course from me, the final 10 chapters used that 10K lathe with this gearbox, although I don't think I featured the gearbox very much in those 10 chapters. Also, if you would want to go back and watch that plea for help, read through the comments and you'll find very interesting comments. In fact, right now, I will post just a sampler of those that help me identify this, so you might want to check that out. Also, there'll be a lot of still pictures at the end of this video from the old South Bend catalogs. Matter of fact, most of those pictures were in that previous video, but since it's temporary, I think it appropriate to include them again. So this will be a rather long video, kind of tedious, and this isn't in real bad shape. Now, it shows an awful lot of wear, but I don't see any broken gear, so the whole purpose here is simply for me to disassemble it and show you how to do that. And then in the following videos, I will have cleaned all of the parts, oiled it, added new wicks. I ordered wicks and felts for this, but no other parts. And hopefully I don't run into any bad problems here. I did also find out that this would not fit my 9-inch lathe, although some people said that they had done that and adapted it, but the holes are in the wrong position, and I think the distance here would not match up with the other one. I'm not totally sure, but at this time I have no intentions of doing that. But there'll be clips in other videos where I set this up next to the 9-inch lathe and show you that it's a little bit large, and it's almost preposterous, I think, to mount it on a 9-inch lathe. This is a pretty heavy gearbox and quite intricate with a lot of gears that would allow you to get 70 different settings rather than the 48. And also, Bruce Chambers just this morning sent me a link to the vintage machinery site of Keith Rucker's, showing it was a little flyer is what it was that was sent out to South Bend people on the new improved version of this. So they must have made this in more than one version if they called it an improved version in 1961. So take a look at that footage right now, and then we'll finally start the disassembly. This is the South Bend flyer sent to me by Bruce Chambers, and it's dated April of 1961, and you can find this on Vintage Machinery. I will put the link in the description, and let me show you the two other pages. This was just a flyer, not a catalog. This is another page in the flyer showing something very unusual here, a longitudinal independent power feed, very similar to what I mounted on an Atlas lathe, homemade of course. I had no idea this existed, and I've never seen one or heard about them until 10 minutes ago. This is the outside of the flyer. That's what it looked like, and it shows all the dealers up here. You won't be interested in that. Again, a big thanks to Michael Yarmarkov for sending this to me free of charge. Quite heavy to send in the mail. and this one appears to be from the mid-50s or early 50s, and several people did tell me how to read this catalog number and how it is coded and what that means. So the mystery is solved. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over because of course all of the work will be done from the back side. Fortunately, Michael or someone else had cleaned this up pretty well. Now, not perfect, but it certainly isn't the filthy mess that you're normally going to find when you turn one of these upside down. Usually they are filled with chips and grease because people clean their lathes, and I do not recommend that, with compressed air, and it blasts the chips up into the gears. And all of that has been removed, if in fact there ever was any, other than debris at the very bottom of each gear. So all of that will be cleaned up when I take it apart. Now when you work on something like this, use brass or lead hammers or plastic hammers and brass punches, although we can use a metal punch to knock out tapered pins or straight pins, and there are several pins that need to be removed, and that's probably the most difficult part. And during this entire disassembly I will I will make sure that the gears stay in the exact same position. For reassembling, I do not believe you should mix and match on older machines like this, because parts have worn in to one another, and I don't think it's a good practice to switch things around. Try to work as cleanly as you can. That's why I say it's nice to have this clean, because in general you're going to have a mess. Now, I don't think anyone on YouTube has ever taken apart the wide range, but there are several pretty good ones on the disassembly of the 48 speed model. All right, the first thing I'm going to do here is remove this straight pin. It's not a tapered pin, so I have to drive that out so that I can pull this shaft out of the housing. And I don't know if, I guess I didn't mention this, but I might possibly paint this, but I don't give you any promises. Again, this is a straight pin, so I'll use a 1/8 inch straight punch. I hope it comes out, and it's all right to use a steel hammer. Ah, it came out. So that is a straight pin, but it is a bent straight pin, so I guess it's not a straight pin. That is, it's not tapered, and that just rides in a groove on the shaft. It is not going through the shaft. It's, I guess you would say, it's tangent to the shaft. The next thing I'm going to do is to take off the guide bar and get it out of the way. There's just 2 screws holding it on, and it should come right off. I don't know if it's pinned on there or not. And yes, indeed, it's pinned on and painted on, so it's going to need a little persuasion. There must be 3 or 4 different colors of paint on this thing. You see there's a couple little pins here and here. It's not the big pins, it's the little pins that held it on, and quite filthy. And remember, all of my cleanup is going to be done off camera so you do not have to suffer through it. Okay, I'm going to pound this shaft out. I don't know if it'll come out easily or not. We'll see. Oh, not bad. Now the tumblers here are, there's a right and a left. Will they come off easily? I might have to do a little cleanup. There is a wick here. Remember, all the wicks are going to come out. I guess the best thing to do is to drive it all the way through using a relatively long brass punch. There's one tumbler, and look at that gear is ready to fall out, isn't it? It did fall out. That is a wick, felt, and I'll replace all of those. And let's see if that'll come out, and it does. And there's that shaft, and remember I told you there was a groove that this bent pin fit in. So, and that looks to be in pretty good shape. Try not to force things. So I was using a screwdriver as a wedge and gently tapping here, and this collar will not come off. And so then it dawned on me, and let me think through this process. I did loosen up the set screw, no problem, but then I got to thinking, since it wouldn't come off, and I don't want to bang on it, that's an awful long set screw, isn't it? And they wouldn't do that, so they have, I believe, double set screwed it. Something that isn't done real often, but maybe you have run into that in your travels. So see what a stubby little set screw that is? And then there's another one in there. You gotta love your Bernards, don't you? Get yourself 10. Now will it come off? Yeah, see, when you got all the fasteners out, comes off pretty nicely, doesn't it? Now there's another straight pin here that needs to be driven out, but I grabbed a hold of this shaft and I don't know if that pin is not through the shaft. Did they miss the mark, or why did this come right out without any pounding at all? There's a Woodruff key. I just realized that the pin here is strictly to hold in this brass bushing. So I am not going to remove the bushing or the pin. There are some parts that I will not take out of here because I have no intentions of replacing them, including this thrust bearing here. I'm not going to take that out, and that is what the lead screw rides in. The lead screw, of course, being over here. And now out comes the cluster right here. I'm trying to hold them together and right away put a wire or a string or something through there so they stay in the same order. This is copper wire. I love it. A piece of solder works great too. Now I need to take out this other shaft so we can get all the gears out of here, and you'll notice that these spin freely on the shaft. The shaft is not turning. These are keyed or fastened to the shaft. So, how do I get the shaft out of there? I don't have a parts breakdown for this. I do have a parts breakdown for the 48 speed, but not this. So I've examined it closely, and there is a pin right here. I'm going to zoom it in. Now that is a tapered pin. So when you have tapered pins, try to determine which is the large end and which is the small end. You don't want to bang on it and just force it in further. So I'll zoom in and we'll see if we can determine that. Okay, look at the pin now. I'll rotate it 180 degrees. You can see that this is the larger end, so I'm going to back it up. And I'm going to tap from this side again with an 1/8 inch punch. I hope that will do it. And will the pin clear on the bottom, or will I be hitting something? Let's see. Mr. Pete, get your hand out of the way. Oh man. That came right out. Okay, this is a machine tapered pin. Are you familiar with them or not? I don't think you see them so often. Often they are using a roll pin or some other kind of drive pin, but these are really a wonderful thing, but you have to assemble it correctly now because the hole is tapered as well. If you are enjoying this video, you may conceivably enjoy this older video of mine where I take apart a Ford transmission and then reassemble it and make a cutaway. I'll put the link in the description. See, that's the key, and that's a wick. Now this whole cluster of gears is sometimes called the Christmas tree cluster, or just the Christmas tree. So I'll keep those all together while I clean them. And this is the one with the tapered pinhole. And that little washer there, it's not actually a washer, but it's a step, goes up against the bearing. And now as I feel of this bearing here, there is a ball bearing here. And it is rough. Matter of fact, it's not turning it at all. That needs to be replaced. Okay, let's take a look at the empty case now. And you can see that again, this is a thrust bearing. Probably needs to be replaced, but since I probably will never use this, I'm not too concerned about doing that. And then I just condemned this bearing, and that is a new departure. I can read it. A new departure 3203, which I think is a common bearing, but upon giving it a good turning here with my hands, I think it is okay. Otherwise, I probably could press a new bearing in there, but maybe I won't bother. But looking here, we have a brass bushing, but since these have been lubricated by the built-in galleries, it appears to be okay. Also, there is a brass bushing right here. And it is okay. Now looking at it from this direction, there are two oilers here and one is broken off, so I've got a spare that I'll put in there. Those press in so I can pop that out and put the new one in a little bit later on. The tag here is kind of beat up, but it's perfectly usable. And I don't see any cracks or any other damage in the case. Let me lay all the parts out now in some kind of order. Well, I better take the gears out of here first. Now I've already marked these with some little scratch lines here. Notice this one is marked as well, so that I can reassemble it in exactly the same way. And these pins are pressed in, so I'll have to drive them out. And I've got it marked so I can put it back in exactly the same. Now there is a needle bearing in there, can you see it? I won't take that pin out any farther than it is. It would serve no purpose. Sure beat up the brass punch. I'll do the other one off camera. Now on the tumblers here, there's nothing wrong at all with the plunger here. It's spring-loaded. I do not intend to take that apart. It would serve no purpose. I can clean it up the way it is. But when you look at things here, It's all disassembled except what I just showed you and a few bearings here. And in all there's 27 gears, 3 shafts, 2 ball bearings, 2 needle bearings, and 2 bronze bearings, plus assorted pins and fasteners, and 2 Gitz oilers. And that's pretty much the sum total of the parts in this gearbox. Well, that pretty much completes this long video, part 1. Be sure and watch part 2, and in that video everything will have been cleaned up, lubricated, and I will reassemble it, installing new wicks, and it's going to be a little more difficult, I think, than taking it apart. I have decided I'm not going to paint this. You know how I dislike painting, although I wouldn't mind painting the inside of this so it's a nice even, but it will not look any different than when I'm done. You know, it isn't real good looking, but that's just the way it's going to be. But before I quit here, let me just show you that most of the gears are pretty well loaded up with debris at the bottom of the teeth where it gets packed in. So these will all be cleaned and examined. But a gear like that looks in very good condition, doesn't it? But I know there's some in the Christmas tree cluster here that show wear, but there's nothing I can do about that other than remove burrs. I doubt that most of these gears or any of the parts are available anymore, so we're not going to worry about that. Also, I will talk about the oil gallery here and how oil is distributed to the various moving parts and bearings by simply oiling it in 2 places here with the Gitz oilers. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up and be sure and stand by and watch part 2 when available. Hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed doing it. You know, I learn a lot more when I do a video like this than what you do when you watch the video. But thank you for watching. And this is Mr. Pete, your old shop teacher, saying so long for now.